Okay, perfect. Clemens, shall we give it a go? Awesome. Hi, everyone. Great to have you in today's town hall session. Quick reminder, as every time, this session is recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube probably later today or tomorrow. Generally, the scope of the session is like I'll share a quick agenda, but at the end we'll do a lot of Q&A and discussion. If you have any questions that come up in the first half of the session, please put it in the Q&A of Google Meet. You can find it on the bottom right. If you go like these kind of like triangular, circular, and rectangular shapes, there you should find the Q&A widget. So you can add new questions for the later Q&A, and you can upvote on other questions. If there's anything that's like immediately interesting, please just use the chat, and Clemens will try to monitor it. And yeah, I'm Marc, one of the founders of Langfuse, and I'm here today together with Clemens, one of my two co-founders. And yeah, we'll get to the team and how Langfuse looks like today in a bit. So generally, agenda for this for the next 60 minutes. I'll do a quick intro, just like a recap of basically where Langfuse stands today after the launch of now, I think like roughly 2 years that Langfuse is basically like in the same space as a project. Then we'll do a recap on the latest changes with the version 3 release. We then jump through like a couple of new items on the changelog, because this has been like fun in the past to just like check out what's new, as many of you requested these features, and maybe it's cool to see them finally live and then later try them in your own projects. Then I have like a brief slide on the evolution of Langfuse over time as context for the update on the roadmap, which highlights some like key pillars of where we want to take the project based on the feedback that many of you have shared on our like posts on GitHub and via our email. And yeah, and in the end, we hopefully have like half an hour for Q&A, feedback, wish list, whatever you want to discuss. And yeah, in the past, the Q&A during these town halls has been like super lively and interesting. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this. So let's get going. Generally, like the best way to get involved is via GitHub. So there's langfuse.com/ideas and langfuse.com/support. This is the best place to raise ideas, shape the roadmap, and get like technical questions answered, because there have been like tons and like I feel like hundreds or thousands of questions overall, meaning we have like pretty solid like AI responses, and we actively monitor this proactively with our maintainers. So you'll get like responses by the engineers who built the relevant features. And yeah, this is basically about Langfuse today. We are currently a team of 7, and we continue to see many like great companies pick up the project, especially, for example, like Samsara or Twilio or Khan Academy are teams who we really like to work with as they build really interesting products and basically shape the project in a way that it's like easily usable in a very advanced context, like drives our API quality and generally being API first. And yeah, it's just like fun to work with so many teams that rely on Langfuse every day. And overall, when like making releases, we try to remember that, for example, like an SDK is like installed like 3 million times a month, which is super wild. So you see this chart, something happened like here. We still try to figure out what, but something happened, and it's been doing well ever since. So yeah, this is the team today. Generally, we mostly focus on the product, where myself, I'm one of the co-founders, generally focusing on like product, working with all of you to actually shape the roadmap. Max is our third co-founder, who focuses on the engineering side, as there's like a lot of things going on to actually scale Langfuse. And for example, Langfuse version 3 was a main achievement of him, together with Steffen, who joined late last year, who runs a lot of our infrastructure and backend heavy features. And there's a lot coming built by Steffen over the next weeks and months. So for example, like an open telemetry collector that we currently built, or like more search or dashboarding capabilities. Then there's Hasib, who probably, if you ever raised an issue on GitHub, you've been in touch with, because he runs all of our SDKs and prompt management. Yannick, who runs community, docs, a lot of like go-to-market and generally like visibility initiatives to basically help other people find Langfuse and then realize like how Langfuse actually works. Marlies, who shipped a ton of features in the product. So mostly, for example, the data sets and prompt experiment changes that we shipped in Q4. And overall, just like lots of things that you see in the UI wouldn't be there without her. And Clemens, who's on the call as well, who together with me focus a lot on like building what actually is this company Langfuse, that this is like a project that can exist for the long run, is financially sustainable, and that we find ways to meaningfully to work commercially with many of the teams that use Langfuse. So next slide. I want to jump into the first main basically agenda point of Langfuse version 3. By now, we released it in early December, the first OSS release, and like many of these pieces of the architecture have been live now for like roughly like 6 to 7 months on Langfuse Cloud already. And it's been like a really, really big update overall to scalability and maturity of the overall product. If you want to learn more, I can really recommend this blog post here that Steffen and Max put out, which highlights basically how we went from like a single Docker container and a single Postgres database to something that's really, really stable, suitable for like production workloads that like generally just scales well and where it hits like the performance that users of Langfuse really require. And there are like some highlights that I wanted to go through today. I mean, Langfuse is primarily about like the traces should always basically end up in the product. And if there's like a huge peak of someone running like a batch job, like they should always show up in product. And with this change, we now have like a very queued and persisted trace ingestion and can like recover events in case of like any kind of like infrastructure problems. We in most cases we should be able to recover them, meaning like data loss is like the risk for it is now very minimal. Then we invested heavily into caching, where for one, it's about just being able to scale when like you guys send us like tons of data, that we don't put a lot of load on databases, and at the same time like prompts, because prompts are so important that they are always available in the application when using Langfuse prompt management. And this change has been overall huge because we added some caching in the SDKs and some on the API layer. And since then, there are like some hiccups here and there, but like the core product performance on prompts has improved a lot over the last 6 to 7 months. Then this change introduced like an analytical database, so like a data warehouse for the core storage of traces, scores, and observations. So the core data that really scales out. And there we can power many analytical features as, for example, the dashboard and many things that we've planned on the roadmap that I'll get to in a moment. And finally, we released an open source Helm chart, which makes it way easier to self-host Langfuse if you want to. Overall complexity of self-hosting Langfuse, obviously, with this change went up, but we published the Helm chart, and we are currently working in what's coming on like deployment templates that should be fairly straightforward for AWS, Azure, and GCP if like you want to self-host and you are not familiar or don't want to run Kubernetes. Together with this change, we released like all new self-hosting docs. I hope you like them. If you have any feedback, please let me know. And generally now what's coming is many analytical features, because we now have the infrastructure to actually do things with like hundreds of millions of traces, which has been a struggle in the past on the previous setup. Awesome. Now I want to jump to latest releases, like what has changed recently about Langfuse, because this was always a fun category in previous town halls. And for this exercise, I'll this time just jump to the changelog, because in the past I've done like live demos, but then in the end it ended up taking too much time. So I'll focus on basically the GIFs that we highlight in the changelog, because they're like a good summary of what's going on. The first one is commit messages on prompt versions. So basically, like being able to just add like a description when you make a change, that in the end, if you have like hundreds of versions of a prompt, that you can figure out what you actually changed. So whenever making a change to a prompt, you can now include a small message. It's totally optional, and then you'll just see it on the prompt version to the right side. This is a very small change on prompts, but it was like, I think one of our top requested changes on prompt management. And there's another one related to prompts, which is basically helping to like see the differences between different prompt versions. This is the UI which we can see when comparing versions that already exist. And when making a prompt change, you will now see a button that basically allows to compare the differences before actually making the change. I'll scroll up because I know it's basically shown in here. So wait, sorry, I'm confused. Here, perfect. So basically you see in the, you don't see anything right now. Here, perfect. So basically when editing a prompt, you now have a button review changes. And when you click on review changes at the bottom, you'll see the diff view first and can basically save a prompt while reviewing what you actually changed, which should be helpful when making like larger changes to prompts, just to be certain that you actually change what you wanted to change. Then next to it, getting started with data sets now is way easier, as there is like a way to upload a CSV file right within the UI, which is especially helpful in conjunction with prompt experiments, which is like a purely UI-based workflow of testing prompts on data sets and getting like evaluation results that we launched in November. And this now helps to, if you have like a Google Sheet with example variable inputs to a prompt, you can upload them as a data set and then directly run a prompt experiment on the data set within the UI. So no more need to basically upload data sets via the Python SDK if you already have a CSV. The problem with CSVs, I mean, they have potentially many columns. So within the import wizard, you can then map the columns to input, expect, output, metadata, which are the 3 fields of Langfuse data sets, where then if you, for example, run prompt experiments, all the input variables are mapped to the variables within a prompt, and you can use the expected output in evals within the platform. As a benchmark, metadata is basically just helps you with like additional fields that you want to store alongside the dataset items. And there was like one other thing that I wanted to show you, improved cost tracking, which landed in December. This is one of the first major features which only landed on Langfuse version 3 in case you self-host Langfuse, because it's like a bigger rewrite of a lot of like ingestion logic. Basically, this now allows for tracking of all sorts of token types. So here you see this kind of like model card that you can see in the model settings in Langfuse now, which allows for this breakdown of different token types. So you can basically map like key value of what do text tokens or cash tokens, what do these kinds of token counts actually cost. We provided, as in the past, basically a mapping for all the popular, for many of the popular models, but you can also bring your own. And it's become way easier directly from tracing to create a new model definition. Like if the model is unknown, you can just click on the model within the trace, and you get a pre-filled model card with the like exact match pattern to create like a new definition for costs for this model. Yeah, these were the very like the top highlights that I wanted to shout out today. But there's a lot coming. And before getting to roadmap, I wanted to take some time to look at the evolution of Langfuse over the last 2 years. Initially, we started with tracing because that's what Max, Clemens, and I needed when building our own LLM applications while doing YC, because we realized like our code generation agent is kind of complicated, and like actually like tracing is interesting, and many people around us found tracing to be really interesting. I mean, we came from more like testing, but realized like creating a test suite out of nothing is really like a big lift. So tracing is like the way larger need. Then added like online evals, basically when you run your alarm application in production and now want to know whether it actually works. We had more like online evaluation to then track whether the like online traces in prod are good or not. For example, like user feedback, annotations, and like external pipelines. Then added prompt management now exactly 1 year ago. This was like a very like quick iteration. We wanted to understand whether like you all actually use it. And then it's grown into, I think, like a very large feature component within the overall platform. Like thereafter, we shipped like many iterations on prompt management to make it faster, more feature rich, added like these deployment labels, Now added like diffs, commit messages, lots of caching, linking to traces that you know how the prompt is actually used in prod, to break down basically your production and testing scores and evaluations, to break them down by prompt version to understand how prompt versions might make a difference with regards to evals and costs. Then added more offline evals to the online evals around data sets, LM as a judge within Langfuse, to make Langfuse more useful when taking things back into development and wanting to benchmark on like a test data set to understand whether the application actually works. And then, I mean, all of this in 4 was still very, very like developer focused, and prompt management also was like the first interface where we saw many non-engineers actually onboard onto Langfuse to then collaborate on prompts and make it easy to version control them. And then prompt experiments is like one of the first features where actually the whole workflow should happen within the UI. It's an initial iteration. We'll iterate more on the UX of the overall capabilities, but this is like really helpful to then, when you make a prompt change and you have a data set of example inputs and benchmarks, to then directly see like, do we cause a regression with this small fix that we actually want to make? Or to test different basically models within the UI. If you're interested in any of these features, we updated the documentation, I think in November, and now include like lots of GIFs and videos for some of these features. Otherwise, always feel free to reach out. And yeah, then Langfuse V3 actually added like a scalable, because before, I mean, it worked on Langfuse Cloud, but in the end, it required like, if a project has a lot of traffic, it really required like scaling out the Postgres database, like dealing with like lots of connections to the database when scaling it. It wasn't great, and version 3 really relieved us from many of these like scalability pains. So thereby, like if you get started with Langfuse or already have like a lot of load, that all of the features actually work well. Yeah, that's the evolution, and that gets us to roadmap. Earlier this year, like we sent around this like short email of like, what shall we build, fix, or improve about Langfuse, because we heard that it works extremely well to gather feedback from you all, from the folks at like, for example, Recent or Greptas or other like dev tool companies that just mentioned to us like, hey, we got like hundreds of responses, and we did too. So sorry, I scrolled. So we got like a ton of email responses to this email. Thanks again for taking the time to respond and to leave feedback on the roadmap discussion thread as well on GitHub. Thank you very much, because in the end, we want to like abstract from all your feedback and then shape the roadmap in a way that's most helpful to like our core users that care the most about Langfuse. So now I want to highlight like a brief rundown on the overall focus areas for the next quarter, but also like looking forward, like what do we care about, where's this project headed. Right now, we do a sprint of like various improvements. So lots of small things where we know they are really, really helpful. So we just double down on like getting many of the existing features right, and like listening to feedback and then just shipping small improvements that are really, really helpful. As for example, we added like log level based filtering on like large agent traces. So if you have like thousands of observations and many of them are basically like debug level, then you can now by default filter them out. And for example, if you upgrade the SDKs and use something like LangGraph, like we also automatically apply these kinds of labels dynamically. So for example, LangGraph traces now should look way better in the UI. We want to add more TypeScript, type-safe SDK methods for all the API routes, because sometimes you currently need to use the API directly, which might be complicated, and we can like auto-generate based on our open API spec. We already shipped commit messages on prompts and being able to duplicate prompts. So previously you couldn't rename prompts, because I mean, if you rename a prompt, basically you take down your application if it uses this prompt name. And now we have like a way to duplicate the prompt while editing the name, so you can like rename thereby without downtime. Change the user screen. We want to add more evaluation runs and historical data, being able to share eval execution states on like the trace and data set. So when a eval is still pending, that you'll see that it's still pending, because currently it's basically, you need to know that the evaluation is still running. Be able to extract more structured data from traces for the evals. We want to make it easier to save like views. So if you use tables a lot with lots of different filter configurations. You can save them at like more of a peak view where you have like a slider for a lot of the interfaces, so you can more easily navigate between a lot of the windows. And we already added like a new observation table. So if maybe you've seen it, the generation table is gone. Now it's like an observation table. So you can also like find spans and events in the same way as previously only generations could be found. And then we get to planned initiatives, like the really big ones. One is we want to double down on like more, I'd say agent is not a great term, but it's okay. What we mean by it is basically we want to improve support for applications that do lots of tool calls, recursive basically states, to be able to, on the one hand, when you see like a single trace, have an easy understanding of what's actually going on. And on the other hand, like have more native support for how then tool calls are like visualized and filterable. And we will probably add some agent evaluation templates. I mean, today, Langfuse evals is mostly like a runner for evals. So all of the templates are just to help everyone get started. So you can bring your own templates, but we just want to add a couple of templates that help to get started when using agents. Then we have some enhancements to the core tracing experience with more native support for environments planned. Currently, this is mostly happening via like tags on traces or via separate projects. Both options have some upsides and downsides. We have an FAQ page. If you Google it, you can find more information on it. So we want to make this easier to separate different environments, support real-time LLMs better. And we're currently working on version 1 of like an OpenTelemetry collector. In the past, we mostly focused on our own instrumentation because, I mean, the overall ecosystem is moving quickly. We are now in like generation, I think like 4 or 5 of how cost tracking works in Langfuse, which is wild because it seems so simple. But just everything is changing all the time, which means if we build the SDKs as a core team ourselves, we can move with the market and with requirements very easily. So in the past, we felt like OpenTelemetry like could slow us down because then it's more like whatever is supported in the current specification. Over the last year, many teams have pushed hard to basically get some standards in place. I mean, it doesn't have like full coverage today, but it's improving. And we just hear that some people have a preference for OpenTelemetry, even if maybe the native support would be better, or they have a preference for OpenTelemetry because they run on Go, run on Java, run on .NET, and currently need to use the Langfuse API directly. And it's way easier to use like the OpenTelemetry SDK for the language and then export to Langfuse. So we are adding like a collector and maybe an exporter. We are currently navigating this. Then as prompt management has been a super popular feature of Langfuse, we have some changes planned. So generally here, our goal is to be like the top of market prompt management solution and just be extremely competitive with regards to features, meaning diff view is already shipped, like considering adding RBAC roles for prompt change management, because some regulated companies that, for example, see prompt changes as basically covered by their software lifecycle policy, need to have some sort of like approval flows on prompt changes or want some specific roles that only allow some people to make prompt changes. We want to look into more LM-assisted prompt engineering to help people who are not native to prompting or haven't done so much prompting in the past to be better at prompts. We want to help like reuse prompts and like more prompt composability, like adding some sort of folder structure, adding better support for tool calls, and a placeholder for chat messages. So if you have a prompt and you have this history of chat messages, that you have like a placeholder, we can then insert them. These are just some examples of what we are considering to build here. Overall feedback on prompt management is very much welcome as we want to double down on it. Evals, I mean, currently evals in Langfuse is super flexible as a data object via the API, and we want to double down on the evaluations that can be run within Langfuse on the one hand. So like non-LM evaluators as like classifiers, some custom code, regex as things that we consider, and then like evals on repeated spans or observations within within a trace. So if you, for example, can evaluate a tool call and you make 10 of them within the same trace to extend basically elements of judge within Langfuse to these tool calls as well. Comparison of different evaluation metrics, because we spoke with many teams who then export scores from Langfuse and then do some correlation, covariance analysis of the different scores. And we want to help do this in Langfuse. Why is this helpful? Because often you have like user feedback coming in, you task some people on your team, or you do it yourself, you label data within the Langfuse UI, and then you have like 10 automated evaluators. Now you want to know, okay, maybe you trust yourself that you judge correctly, and now you want to know, do your users judge in a similar way as yourself, and do the automated evaluators somehow align with your own judgment? To then, when you build trust into an evaluator, scale it out and be able to trust it. So this is about basically the visualization around evals and session level scores. Currently, scores can only be applied to traces and observations, and we want to find like smart ways to apply them to sessions, thereby like conversations. There are some downsides to this and some risks which are highlighted in this thread. That's why it wasn't like a quick change in the past. Then like a major point is many of you have like hundreds of millions of traces when they use Langfuse in production. And today, a lot of the data, if this scales out, is used via the dashboard or via the APIs to power downstream use cases, or to use evals to then filter down to like a manageable number that can then be used for fine-tuning or for manual inspection. Well, this is a start. We feel like we could do way better as a project to then help like find the relevant ones or derive insights from this large volume of traces within Langfuse. So first is full text search. I think it's one of the most requested features overall, which is just with the amount of text that we get every day, difficult to pull off without needing to spin up a lot of infrastructure, which then makes self-hosting more difficult. We're currently navigating this. There's like a search PR or working change within ClickHouse, which might make this more like simpler than we expected. So we're currently investigating this. And self-serve dashboards, because a lot of the data in Langfuse is very flexible, and the kinds of analysis you want to run is flexible. And we have some teams that export the data from Langfuse, for example, via Airbyte or via like scheduled exports from the API manually to their own data warehouse to then do like some downstream analysis. Well, I mean, this is possible. You have full access to the data that's in Langfuse. We want to make this easier. So offering some sort of basically visualization similar to like a postdoc Grafana. I mean, similar to a Grafana is like a tall ask, but we think we can get there and build something meaningful. And finally, some things around the lines of like Langfuse being like a core data platform for this workflow, which I mean touches production, touches the like development workflow, touches fine-tuning, and many efforts around an LM application. So we want to make it easier to use Langfuse to then power some more customized experiences and workflows. One is like event-based webhooks to subscribe to changes, to, for example, like trigger changes in some other external workflows, some batched exports, for example, to your own storage buckets. So if you use, I don't know, BigQuery, and you now want to run some very custom analysis, or you just want to like export to your own bucket to do whatever you want, basically. Currently, you can do this via the API. But I mean, if your project scales via the API, it's tedious, not super stable. So basically, batched, for example, like hourly exports to your own bucket are just way easier to then use it within like your data lake, for example. And finally, some like rule-based in-UI routing between Langfuse product features is something that we actively look into, because in the end, like there's Langfuse datasets, evals, and Langfuse tracing, and all of this exists in like development and production and annotation queues. Like you really want to route based on filters between these features. As for example, let's imagine you have a production trace, you got negative user feedback, and now you want to set up like a policy that every negative user feedback is reviewed by like an internal domain expert, who then uses the annotation queue to review the data. And if it's then, for example, flagged as incorrect and like a mistake, then you directly want to add it to like a data set, which is then used for like regression testing or some other workflows internally. And same could apply for evals, that you only run evals within Langfuse or run a webhook when a user complains. So you can like save evaluation costs and just like evaluate the traces where people complain to then, for example, debug what sort of issue might be at hand. And finally, some like auxiliary changes around the UI UX overall of Langfuse, because now, I mean, increasingly with the size of the project, it just makes a lot of sense to revisit how many of the features look like and how usable they are, to make Langfuse easier and more approachable to people coming in. And as like the teams grow that use Langfuse, there's like a huge benefit in this. Overall onboarding, I mean, same goal, make Langfuse more approachable and easier. And data retention, so to make it easier to comply with regulations. If you, for example, can only store data for a month, that you can set a retention policy on your Langfuse project yourself, like project-based. This has been available on Langfuse Cloud for everyone reaching out. And there's like a thread which is linked here with the queries that you need to run in case you self-host. But we just want to make it easier as like a productized feature now that data is also spread on more data stores. Yeah, this is like the high-level rundown. Please keep the feedback coming if you have any like ideas or feature requests along the core lines around these topics, or if you feel like, hey, guys, this is like a good start, but I actually want something completely different, please tell me. Just reach out via email or GitHub. We really value your feedback. Yeah, coming back to the slide. Let's go to the next one. Final slide, basically. We are hiring in Berlin. Like I'm super proud of the team. We do a lot with few people, as everyone on this picture is doing a lot. And if you feel like this could be fun to work on, or if you know someone, we are hiring currently in Berlin, Germany. So maybe if you aren't here, this might be difficult. But if you are, feel free to reach out across like design, product engineering, backend engineering, and for like developer advocacy. Yeah, just ping us in case you're interested. And yeah, thanks again also at the end for the great discussions on GitHub and Discord regarding the roadmap, many contributions related to integrations, bug fixes. So like GitHub issues, pull requests are super appreciated. It's like a very easy way to work with you all. And yeah, bug reports with like reproducible details and information that can actually then be fixed quickly is very, very much appreciated. So I would stop here. Perfect. I did it in 30 minutes. This is great. Let's get the discussion started. And like if you have something that comes to mind basically after this call, as mentioned earlier, langfuse.com/ideas is awesome if you have any ideas with regards to roadmap. There are already like, I think, hundreds of different threads, meaning if you have an idea, feel free to search for it. Maybe there's already like a long discussion on it. With some ideas and trade-offs, and every upvote or +1 and comment on more details is appreciated, as it just has like a great discussion and background then for anyone who either contributes it, or if someone of the core maintainers picks it up, if it's like highly requested, as it then has a lot of context, and just the chances of the feature actually solving your use case increases. And again, Langfuse support, if you have like technical questions, please use the GitHub discussions threads. We are still active on Discord, but with like growing size of the project and many of the technical questions require like threads of context, like GitHub has been way better at then scaling and helping everyone to keep tabs on whether like all questions are actually answered, and where help is needed. And yeah, again, how Q&A works in Google Meet. Many of you have already discovered it, I saw. Go to Q&A and list your questions, and then we can go through all of them. Clemens, is there something that's already super urgent, or shall we just continue with the questions top down?
I think we can start top down. There's a couple of questions already in the Q&A. What's at the top for you, or should I just read them out?
I can do it myself. Can you maybe create a question? Because Google Meet has this weird problem of me not being able to click on it. I can only click on the notification when a new one comes in to then see the
test question.
Perfect. Worked.
Okay.
Awesome. I had this problem for the last year. I mean, the feature is great, but this kind of doesn't work. Okay, I'll start oldest first. Or maybe do we have upvotes? Popular?
We have upvotes, yeah.
Perfect. Is there David? Hi, David. Nice to have you here. Is there a confirmed date for when Langfuse version 2 support is end of life? We generally commit to vulnerability updates for at least end of March of this year. This was basically publicly shared beforehand, as we want to give everyone enough time to basically migrate to version 3. Overall, also, we have, as mentioned earlier, templates planned for GCP, AWS, and Azure to really simplify this. And generally, you can assume that vulnerability updates will be available until after we have shipped these templates to make this change easier. And also, I mean, the vulnerability updates, if you want to stay on Langfuse version 2, vulnerability updates might be also simple. So if you wanted to, you can also fork version 2 and maintain this, or submit PRs to fix vulnerability problems afterwards. We're happy to review. So yeah, no fixed date, but at least until end of March of this year. Then next question, is ClickHouse still going to be a hard requirement for Langfuse version 3? We've been staying on V2 because the extra cost and or complexity with ClickHouse. Yeah, we've heard this a lot. And generally here, so short answer, yes, ClickHouse will be required. The background is basically we had the tough choice between two options, or three options. Either staying on Postgres with Langfuse in general, which makes it terribly easy to self-host. So this was incredible. But thereby it basically caps performance on anything that's interesting related to analytics, or also overall throughput of the application, which basically which gave us the choice, stay easy to self-host but not really scalable, which puts a cap on the progression on how successful this can become as a project, and also on the teams that can be successful with Langfuse. Because if you knew that your project will scale, then Langfuse wouldn't be the right choice. Langfuse version 2. So ClickHouse is basically set, and we debated whether we should offer ClickHouse and a Postgres version of version 3. And for now, we decided to only offer the version that involves the whole infrastructure, because already today, Langfuse is a comparatively complex project, as we focus on making self-hosting easy and have lots of configuration options. So overall, most Langfuse instances are somehow configured differently. Then we have lots of different integrations. Just complexity rises a lot with the project, which can slow us down in our release cycles. And we really want to watch out for cutting complexity where we can, and maintaining a Postgres and a ClickHouse version, where then we as a team only run a ClickHouse version for the cloud product. It will be really difficult to then maintain the open source version, which is available as a Postgres flavor, if we don't actually run it. So we don't feel comfortable putting it out for now. This might change in the future, but for now we are pretty set on just offering a single, basically, edition of Langfuse, to just be sure that when you install it, we can basically vouch for this works, and you won't have major problems because we run it ourselves. We rather want to solve this problem via lots of templates to help you get started and deploy Langfuse on the different providers. Maybe invest more into cloud marketplaces. We don't know yet, but I think templates work better with our community. And having a generous free plan and solid pricing on cloud for small projects, where basically, with more infrastructure components, basically the smallest deployment cost of running Langfuse increased. So yeah, the cloud option might be cheaper if the project doesn't need scale. We do have the Docker Compose version to deploy Langfuse, and some teams are using this. So if it's low scale, this can work. However, we wouldn't recommend if you need any sort of scaling or failovers, as it's more a development staging version of Langfuse. I hope, David, this is a good summary and helps judge based on your question. We'll have to do follow-ups on this topic. Maybe let's get through all questions once, and then we can see whether we can go deeper here, given the time. Nicholas asks, is there a way to export or see the most current complete Langfuse documentation and cookbook code examples as an MD file? Use case, paste the full docs MD file into O1 Pro together with my code file and tell it to implement Langfuse. This is interesting. We added the LLM TXT, basically, which is like a file that just includes links to the relevant documents. Generally, you can get all of the Langfuse docs if you just pull them from the docs repository. So this is all open source MIT licensed. And when creating this LLM TXT, I once thought about, oh, let's put like all of this content into this TXT file, so it's like immediately available. In the end, it was like so large, like my ChatGPT crashed when I tried to load it. But if you want to use it, I think it should be fairly easy if you use like Cursor or something. If you just pull the docs repo, it should be fairly easy to get like a text file out. If you have something that you want to contribute to the docs repo, so this is like available as like an MD file and published, very open for contributions on this, as I think this would be really cool. Darren asks, can you go into detail the main difference between using the normal Langfuse trace compared to OpenTelemetry? Is it runtime, async? What is the main advantages of not using OpenTelemetry and just sticking to Langfuse tracing? This is a great question. Generally, like at runtime, everything should be fairly similar because, like with regards to performance, because Langfuse tracing, since we launched roughly 2 years ago, we invest a lot into the SDKs to export traces async, meaning Langfuse trace integrations should get out of the main thread as quickly as possible and then use like a background like worker thread to basically export and send data to Langfuse. So the performance profile should be roughly similar to OpenTelemetry, although OpenTelemetry obviously has like a larger tech stack around this with like exporters and sidecars. But generally, this should be fairly similar with regards to performance. The difference here is more in the schema where, for example, we have multimodal tokens, multimodal traces, like the complexity of what's always evolving within like LLM calls. Like with our own instrumentation, we have more flexibility around like moving quickly when something new is released to support it in Langfuse because we fully own the schema and can make changes. Here, the difference is within OpenTelemetry, it's more like a communal decision within the OpenTelemetry repository to then align with all stakeholders on a schema, which in the end is super powerful once the schema and semantic conversions are in place. And they're increasingly doing well on this, meaning we want to like basically create like a compatibility layer to then import like offer a collector so you can like send Langfuse, send traces to Langfuse via like OpenTelemetry based instrumentation. But we expect in like the short term and midterm that our own instrumentations will be more feature complete as we have more control and can move faster with changes. But I think OpenTelemetry has the advantage of them being less dependent on the languages that we support and can be like more community sourced. So for example, we have like newly up and coming frameworks as, for example, Identic AI, or I forgot the name, like Microsoft has like an agent framework, which AutoGen, yeah. I mean, these frameworks themselves export OpenTelemetry traces and have this instrumentation built in, or there is an instrumentation library for it, meaning once we ship an OTel collector, basically the coverage of Langfuse overall just increases to all of these like frameworks. That's why we are really excited to launch this. We have like an internal prototype and expect a beta version of this very, 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 very soon. So you can then just try, give feedback, and see the differences of the two approaches. Happy to go deeper at the end. This would be like my like 2-minute take. Niran Khan, I hope Niran Khan. I'm not a technical interested in. I'm a non-technical interested in prompt management. I have some prompt structure which have worked really well. I have noticed that there is variable components. How to use it? Do you have some cookbook to help us analyze prompts better? Generally, Langfuse prompts support variables, so you can have these kind of like double curly brackets to insert variables. So then basically, if you're not technical, then your engineers can basically use these prompts and always insert the same variables. So I don't know, you have like user age, a username. So if you want to greet the person, for example, the engineers could implement that always username is available as like the username variable within the prompt. And thereby you can then edit the prompt and use this variable in flexible ways. This is generally how variables work. And then like analyzing and experimenting with prompts, I would have a look at the video of Langfuse prompt experiments, where in the UI you can add data sets with these variables. And for example, upload a CSV. So if it's like user age, user name, and now you want to test whether it actually works on like 50 examples, you can then run the prompt version on this data set with these variables. We have some cookbooks on how to generally implement Langfuse prompt management with your application. So for the different frameworks that we support, to make it easier to get started with an example. But this is geared more towards the engineering side. Because on the non-technical like interface side, we just have a video that shows you how the interface actually works. I hope this helps. If you have questions on this, please reach out to us. I need one step. Next question from Niran Khan. Do you train from the traces generated from you? Is there an option to opt out? How can we handle reasoning models like DeepSeek R1? Can they also work well in Langfuse? First of all, we don't train on the basically data stored on Langfuse Cloud. You can review our terms and conditions, where we have like a full section on that we don't do these kinds of things with your data. Your data is yours. You can basically if you use Langfuse Cloud and you have like a support question, then you can share a link and we look into the trace together with you. But other than this, we don't do things with your traces. I mean, we log very high level metrics as like product analytics just to understand like which kind of features are used more frequently. But I think this is like pretty standard and like nothing that relates to the like data that you actually ingest to Langfuse. For more details, definitely check out the terms and conditions and the privacy policy, because there we like put this into more writing. And usually if you're concerned about this, like me telling it verbally is one thing, but being able to read what we basically commit to is another thing. And then reasoning models. Like R1 is exciting because it's like a reasoning model that outputs reasoning tokens, and not a reasoning model that tells you that it reasoned and it costs for reasoning, but you don't get reasoning tokens. Generally, right now, the chat ML, this kind of like chat message markup for reasoning models isn't like super standardized yet, to the best of my knowledge. If you have like feedback on this, please let me know. We're currently like exploring how this could look like, and are basically also waiting for like one of the like larger model vendors to put something out, or just to see that like the market is converging on a schema around reasoning models. Today, if you, for example, add like in the chat message in the chat message list, if you have like a reasoning step, or log an additional reasoning key, so no matter how it's implemented, depending on the like inference provider that you use, you will see this as like a JSON field within Langfuse traces. If you feel like this doesn't look good enough, please open an issue, and we're happy to have a look and fix this. So generally, reasoning models should be well supported. And if there's something that doesn't work well, please let us know. So this is definitely important for us. Yeah, so I think I got through all of the questions. Clemens, is there something in the chat? I don't want to close the Q&A if I can't open it.
There's nothing in the sort of general chat. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them into the chat, into the Q&A, or just unmute yourself and ask them freely. Last chance. And otherwise, I think Mark's mentioned best places to reach us remain GitHub, and then also Discord.
Yeah, overall we're like super excited for the year. Like all of the roadmap work with many of you has been super exciting. Yes, Darren.
Hi, Mark. So I just got one more question, mainly around the tracing part. I've been more working with the Vercel SDK for the tracing, and one of the problems I've had is with agentic workflows with tool calling, mainly if using open source models. So I've kind of gone down just using Langtrace for everything over than open telemetry. So that's why I was just very interested in your response earlier. And you said you'd go into a bit more detail on the asynchronous stuff. Because the main thing what I did originally, I was having a bit of issues with the await, to drain out the trace, so my application wouldn't be waiting for the logging system to finish. I just want to know if there's any suggestions or things I should take into consideration, so if the logging does fail, it doesn't break the application.
Yeah. Is your application, do you run it like serverless?
Yeah, I run in serverless, correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think serverless is the one thing where OpenTelemetry tracing will be way better, because currently, basically, the Langfuse SDKs depend usually on the hotness of the serverless function or on this awaiting this flush command to actually log the traces to Langfuse, which can add latency or can add like some issues in these asynchronous workflows. I know that some users figure this out depending on the provider that you use. For example, on Cloudflare workers and on Vercel Cloud Functions, there's this wait until hook that basically schedules that tells the overall function execution environment to wait for a promise to resolve before actually shutting down the function. Thereby, you can respond right away, but make sure that like the function still waits for this until it shuts down, which is really cool. This is way more difficult if you use AWS Lambdas, for example, natively. So in Lambdas, for example, OpenTelemetry will be way easier because then you can deploy this. I think it's called Lambda Stack or something. I mean, for OpenTelemetry, they have something native that then has like a sidecar that then collects these traces and exports them. So yeah, OpenTelemetry support is coming. If this has been a problem for you in your stack, if it's not Cloudflare or Vercel, where wait until should be the solution, then wait for the OTel collector. It's about to drop in like probably like a week or two. No promises, but I mean, I've seen like a working version. I think it's it will ship very quickly. But generally, we learned that like everything is more complicated. Maybe there's still something that we want to fix before we actually put it out. But I think a beta version is launching like very soon.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's actually Lambdas, so I'm falling right into that the crack there.
Okay, yeah. I think I've been on like many calls with regards to Lambdas. Some people have figured it out, but it's like, yeah, this is I think the most. I think on GCP it's like solvable. On Lambdas, it was always only solvable with like awaiting the flush, where you can like mitigate it by flushing every event individually with like flush at one. Thereby, the final waiting time is lower, but it's not perfect, and OTel will solve this.
I'll look for the release. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, super excited for it. If you are not subscribed yet, definitely subscribe to the GitHub thread on like support for OpenTelemetry, because then we can notify you when like a version is available for testing.
Thank you. I actually don't know how to subscribe to a thread in GitHub. That's the first time I'm hearing about this, to be honest.
Okay. Let's do this together. Let me see. So if we go to GitHub, we should be, if we go to discussions and take like, for example, OTel, top past year, I think there should be like this subscribe button. I mean, I'm subscribed, I think, to everything, but you can like subscribe here, and then you should get like email notifications whenever there's like something happening here. And yeah, like basically when this drops as like a beta version, there might be like just like a preview docs link, so nothing like official yet, because we want to highlight like, I mean, some of the schemas then might still change, or like some of the implementation details. So we usually pre-release features in these threads with everyone who really wanted something, and then basically then make like a formal release when something is really stable, because we don't want to put out something that we then need to like where we then need to make breaking changes. I mean, since launching Langfuse, we released Langfuse version 2, which had breaking changes on the API level, which is way back. I think it was like after the first 3 months, we just needed to fix some things that we didn't get right the first time. And then version 3 was like a breaking change, but just on like the infrastructure level, not on the API level. And yeah, with like the auto collector, we also like we want to get it right before getting it out, because we know that once we put it out, we don't want to like make big changes.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Is there something else that's interesting? We have like another 3 minutes. Otherwise, we have finished on time.
I've got one thing just as a question. I don't really, it's more discussion than anything else. What are your thoughts on these projects for automatically training your prompts? Because we're getting new models dropped every day. And I keep running into this discussion everywhere I go. So I don't know if you guys have, like, because you're more close to the scene, have you heard anything or any approaches that are looking appealing for this?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think the project that got the most like attention around this and popularized it was like DSPy, and generally this is very interesting, but it depends on like the use case. Very similar to, for example, like fine tuning for a use case where it can be super powerful, but depends on like the kind of problem you're solving. Like in general, if you use like automated prompt engineering, I'd say, or prompt optimization on a data set, like it's really about like the how much like variability of use cases you have. Like is in the end like does the data set mirror what you'll see in production? Like if the use case is super constrained, so for example, like a classification problem, you have like input data and just want to like classify with like a single token that's outputted. I mean, stupid example, but might be what you want to do. Then if your data set is large enough, then you can assume that automated prompt engineering gets you to a good example, good prompt. But if you, for example, build like a generic assistant in customer support, then maybe you over-optimize on the dataset items if they don't generalize well. So like traditional ML problems of like overfitting on the dataset. And this is basically what we've heard from many people, where depending on how broad a domain or problem is, it's easier as like someone who has domain expertise to write a like more generic prompt that then generalizes well, than to come up with a data set that then is general enough for the use case to then help the automated prompt engineering to produce a good prompt. So it depends on the use case. If you have something that's super standard, then automated prompt engineering can work really well. If you do like extraction, classification, or something where you feel like your data set really like outlines all cases that you can see in prod. I hope this helps. If not, feel free to like open like a discussion thread, and I'm happy to share some notes.
You know, it helps a lot. I just wanted to know because there's a lot of hype going around some of the automatic prompt engineering stuff. So that's why I'm just checking in. Thanks.
Yeah, it's like I think a big thing that we've seen since working on Langfuse. Now working with like probably talking to like over like it's probably 4-digit by now. Just like there are so many different problems that people have. Overall, it's all a very similar problem of how to close the loop, how to work with like different teams working on the same application, how to learn effectively from production in like a more complex application that uses like chain reasoning to then improve the application development and launch again with confidence. This is the same, but then like which kinds of approaches work well are very different. If you want to learn more, like our strategy here has been to just link to very good content. So if you are up for a read, I can recommend langfuse.com/library, which is like basically like a link collection to very good articles on different topics. Maybe these are helpful for you, especially the evaluation and prompting sections are really good. And I like the reads on agents by Anthropic and the Ellipsis team. So yeah, this is like some content I can really recommend.
Yeah, thank you. Your last recommendation on evals was really inciting, all the eval tests. So yeah, I'll read.
Yeah, the eval, like the Hamel and Eugene blog posts have been really nice. Awesome. Looking at the time, I would love to close the session for today. As always, ping us on Discord or preferably on GitHub. And yeah, we are super excited for this year to execute on the roadmap together and see where we all take the product. And yeah, you'll hear more from us. We plan to send like more monthly email updates as well, because as the product changes, it might be difficult to keep up with what's actually happening. And at the same regard, like we'll like create more content on how to best use Langfuse this year, because last year has been really like docs focused and we want to make it more approachable. So yeah, thanks everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you. See you in a bit.